Welcome to this explainer. Ever catch yourself wondering how we actually know, for a fact, what happened thousands of years ago? Well, we aren't just guessing out here. We are applying a highly meticulous, multi-layered science. So today we're taking a really fun, structured journey into the detective process of archaeology. And we're going to look at exactly how researchers pull ancient history straight out of the dirt.
I mean, just think about it for a second. How do we unearth the secrets of a city that has been totally leveled by fire, crushed by earthquakes, and then stubbornly rebuilt directly on top of its own ashes, over and over again for literally millennia? The past is basically a lockbox waiting to be opened, and the ground right beneath our feet holds the key.
To pick that lock, we follow a pretty precise 6-step scientific method. We've got 1, geography, 2, surveying the surface, 3, anatomy of a tell, 4, the science of dating, 5, excavating the past, and finally, 6, deciphering ancient texts. Let's dive in.
Step 1. Geography, the land between.
Right, so before we even think about touching a shovel, we have to understand the geographic chessboard. The ancient Near East, specifically the southern Levant, is actually often called the land between. And why is that? Well, because it sits perfectly as this geographical funnel squeezed right between the impenetrable Syrian desert on the east and the Mediterranean Sea to the west. And this narrow little strip funneled just massive amounts of traffic between the two great river superpowers of the ancient world, Egypt and Mesopotamia.
And this illustrates exactly what happens when you live in a toll booth between empires. If you control this land, you control the trade. Period. So you inevitably have constant, violent conflict as these armies march back and forth. You combine that with natural disasters, things like earthquakes, and you get continuous cycles of destruction. But here's the thing. This constant churning leaves behind a very specific residue of destruction in the landscape, and that is exactly what archaeologists study.
Which brings us to step 2, surveying the surface.
Now, you might think archaeology starts with digging giant, dramatic trenches. But actually, it starts with decades-long regional surveys where teams just systematically walk the landscape. They really don't do major digging yet. They might just dig a single shovel-test pit here or there. Mostly, they're just picking up scattered pottery shards lying right there on the surface. And because pottery styles change over time, those surface shards act as a massive diagnostic tool. They allow archaeologists to trace historical settlement trends and figure out exactly when different sites were occupied without moving tons of earth.
All right, step 3, anatomy of a tell. Once these sites are identified, we often find that they take a very specific shape. See, in the ancient world, real estate was entirely about survival. Ancient peoples anchored their cities to indispensable natural resources, specifically reliable water sources like natural springs or carved cisterns, and major trade routes. And that geographic commitment drove literally everything that followed. If your city was destroyed, you didn't just pack up and move. You absolutely needed that water and that road.
And this leads to this totally fascinating cycle of destruction and rebuilding. First, the settlement is built by the water. Second, a disaster strikes, like a terrible fire or a massive earthquake levels the whole city. Third, the survivors don't clear the foundation. I mean, wood and hewn stones are incredibly precious, right? So they just flatten the ashes and rebuild right on top, reusing whatever surviving materials they can find. Over centuries, this repeats, city upon ruined city, until a huge artificial mound forms. This is known as a tell. It's essentially a towering layer cake of ancient civilizations.
Moving on to step 4, the science of dating.
Okay, so we have this incredible layer cake, but how do we actually know how old the layers are? Well, the secret lies in the artifacts, especially the pottery. Think of it kind of like the evolution of the Coca-Cola container. If you dig up a classic glass bottle, you'd probably guess the 1960s. A thick aluminum pull-tab can, the 1970s. Tapered aluminum, the 80s. Plastic, the 90s. Just like Coke bottles, ancient bowls and oil lamps change in style over time. So, by tracking these stylistic changes, archaeologists can map out the timeline of a tell.
So the absolutely crucial point here is that we use 2 types of dating. Relative dating relies on the law of superposition, which is really just a fancy way of saying older stuff is buried deeper than newer stuff, combined with those evolving pottery styles we just talked about. Absolute dating, on the other hand, tries to peg an exact calendar year using hard science like radiocarbon dating or written artifacts like coins and Egyptian scarabs, but it is complicated. Carbon dating can easily have a 50 to 75-year error margin, and a beautiful Egyptian scarab, well, that might have been kept as a family heirloom for generations before it was finally buried.
Step 5, excavating the past.
With our dating methods in hand, we're finally ready for the physical unearthing. And guys, this is where the stakes get incredibly high. As Dr. Jonathan Greer points out, archaeology is a destructive science. Once you remove that information, you can't go back. You literally cannot put a 3,000-year-old layer back together once you've dug it up. Which means that meticulous, obsessive recording isn't just helpful here. It is an absolute, non-negotiable necessity.
So, to impose some order on the chaos of the dirt, archaeologists don't just dig a massive, messy hole. They dig in highly precise 5 by 5 meter squares. And they leave these 1 meter thick walls of dirt between the squares, which are called bulks. Now, these act as retaining walls, sure, but more importantly, they allow researchers to look directly at the side of the trench and clearly read the exact stratigraphic layers they've just dug through.
And the toolkit they use? Astonishingly precise. We're not talking about bulldozers down there. They scrape mere millimeters at a time with a mason's trowel. They sweep delicately with fine brushes. They sift the dirt through screens to catch even the tiniest bone fragments. They'll even take buckets of dirt, add water, and float the organic material to the top to identify ancient plant DNA under a microscope. It's wild. And to record it all before it's gone forever, they map every single thing with GPS, 3D photogrammetry, and aerial drones. But honestly, pulling an object out of the ground is only half the battle. What happens when you find something completely bizarre that you don't recognize? Well, that's where ethnoarchaeology comes in. This is the principle of analogy. It basically means studying traditional societies today, like how do they butcher meat or fire clay pots, to figure out exactly what those strange, newly excavated ancient objects were actually used for. Because without this, we run into what I like to call the Little Mermaid problem. Remember when Ariel finds a fork and, completely lacking the cultural context, just assumes it's a dingle hopper for brushing her hair? It's a pretty funny analogy, but it perfectly highlights how easily we modern researchers can completely misinterpret ancient tools if we don't use that principle of analogy to understand the cultural context.
And finally, step 6, deciphering ancient texts.
So, we've analyzed the physical artifacts, but what about the written word? Archaeology took a massive, world-changing leap forward when we began to crack lost ancient languages. And the ultimate example of this is the Rosetta Stone, because it featured the exact same text in Greek, which scholars could read, alongside 2 forms of Egyptian, including the completely lost language of hieroglyphs. It basically became the ultimate decoder ring for the ancient Near East. The timeline of this discovery is just thrilling. Napoleon's forces literally stumble upon the stone in 1799. Throughout the early 1800s, you have scholars frantically comparing known Greek names to the circled Egyptian cartouches. And finally, in 1822, Jean-François Champollion actually cracks the code. Suddenly, literally thousands of inscriptions on tombs and temple walls could actually speak to us, blending linguistics with physical dirt archaeology to illuminate entire lost worlds. But listen, none of this brilliant science, the digging, the dating, the deciphering, none of it matters if it just stays hidden away in a notebook somewhere. The absolute final step of archaeology is publication. Today, the absolute gold standard is synthesizing this massive amount of data and releasing it as open-source digital material. It's really all about sharing the findings freely with the global interpretive community so we can all understand our shared human past. So, we've explored the geography, the survey methods, the layer cake of the tell, and the incredibly precise tools used to pull history from the earth. But as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a thought to really ponder. If ancient cities were destroyed, rebuilt, and buried into mounds, and if archaeology is a destructive science that pieces together the past from those very ashes, what hidden layers of our present civilization will researchers be digging up, dating, and deciphering thousands of years from now? Basically, what will our layer of the tell look like? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep asking the big questions.